I'm really happy now that this book, when it came out, it was triggered again by an oral story. I mean, in a sense, I started it as an oral story, but the stimulus, the trigger was the fact that somebody had mentioned something that happened in Singapore, and it disturbed me enough to actually create a story about it, because I felt that we needed to be addressing some of these things. And I presented it orally, and then I showed Ho Fang, and he said, do you have more stories? I said, oh yeah, I've got plenty of stories like this. And so we put it down, and it's a big honor to have this. But what is really important to me, and what is very reassuring to me, is that when my friends read it, my friends who are all here, each of them, I think, felt that there was a connection. And therefore, each of them is going to be taking turns to read a little excerpt, and perhaps they can explain to you whether this is a true story for them in some way or the other. Right? So, and Jessie has kept us all in line, so Jessie's in charge.
Yeah, take a back seat. And my kids will do that.
Oh. So Jessie, who's going to be reading first?
Dolly.
Dolly's going to be reading first. You can take the teachers out of school, but you can't take the school out of the teachers. Okay. Dolly, what do you want to say?
Okay, I think being a storyteller, it's easier to tell a story than to read a story. Because with age, there's this bifocal lens, and you have to pull it down, and you have to look up, and you have to remember to look at the audience and the book. And that's terrible. Okay, I chose this story, The Assignment. When I read the story, it brought back memories of my two girls when they were choosing friends to participate, to work with them on projects. And don't want this girl. She won't do much, she won't help us. Yeah, and she's so lazy. No, we don't want her. And so they picked the girls and they passed comments. And someone said, oh yeah, we should pick this girl because hey, she'll buy us nice lunch, she's rich. So it brought back that memory. But what actually brought back another memory for me was when I was a young girl. I was young once. And I was also interested in boys. And whenever we girls get together, we would be loud and noisy and everything. But the moment when we saw next at the coffee shop or somewhere, there was this group of ACS boys, all of us would sit very nicely, and we would eat like ladies, and we would talk very nicely. And then we would be looking at them across, and it brought back all this connection to me. Okay, so I'm going to read this one. Anna had suggested Uma's name for the group because she thought Uma was more competitive and more focused than herself was. Uma had always been the top student in the class. One could tell her parents were well educated and had good jobs. Anna had seen them at community events where they had spoken articulately and were treated with deference. It was surprising then that Uma herself was not more popular in school. Perhaps it was because her attendance had always been somewhat irregular. It would be difficult to keep abreast of everything that was happening with your friends when you were not around for much of the time. Despite that, Uma maintained her position academically, and though the teacher had the final say about the groups, she had seemed almost grateful to be invited to join them. So, Uma was responsible for the editing and the layout of the final text. She would be able to tie things together and tidy up their ideas to make the project look good. It was important that she be here now, so that the rest of them would decide in which order they were to speak, and what each of them should concentrate on. But where is Uma? Why grumbled Anna. Hey, chill, what's your problem? She'll come when she can, mumbled Serena, as she worked through a mouthful of food as elegantly as she could. She wiped her mouth with her tissue and sat a little straighter. She had noticed that there was a group of slightly older students from another school working at the next table, and they included a couple of guys who were beginning to glance their way with some interest. There she is, said Noor, glancing up towards a book. They turned and watched through the glass as a black car turned into the entrance of the mall. Una got off, bent again to say something to the person driving, and then looked around to find a way. She gets dropped off by car, and yet she's the one who's late, said Anna. Una made her way towards them. Sorry, so sorry, so sorry for making you wait. I had to. Her voice faded away. She looked thin, tired, and wan. She seemed to sway a little, but sat down and steadied herself. Anna stared at her, but decided not to respond to that. She turned to the others and added, Okay, let's start. The presentation went well enough. It was difficult to say exactly how they had done compared to the other groups of similar ability. They would only get their results at the end of the term. Till then, they would chew their nails and wait. 1 week later, Anna was at home when she got an SMS from Noor that read, Call me now. She dialed from the house phone in her parents' room. Did you hear? What? About Uma? What? What about her? And Anna listened as Noor explained. What? Oh! In a panic, Anna did not realize how loudly she was talking. Oh! Anna! Her mother marched into the bedroom and looked at her sternly. But Anna did not hear her mother.
Thank you, Dolly. Do you want to? Yeah, you explained a little bit about why you chose it because of the ACS boys.
Yes, it brought back all of us sitting down, all pretending to be so ladylike. And taking little bites from their fishbowl.
Trying to eat a fishbowl elegantly.
Yes.
It was interesting because when Nancy spoke at the launch earlier, she was asking about, as oral storytellers, we constantly change and we keep looking at the audience and we retell the story. And it's not so much about the words, but about the story. So it can be a bit of a constraint, right? Sometimes reading from the text, because especially if you think you know the story and you feel, in a sense, connected to the story, you want to tell it in your own way. And I know some authors might have a different opinion about it. I must say that we, the editors and I, worked very hard to edit as carefully as we could, but we were editing for the written text. And so if you find that it is a true story and you're reading it aloud, please feel free to tell it, if the odd word changes or, the pacing has to suit your voice, please read it or tell it the way you're comfortable. Okay? Thank you very much. So who's going next? Yeah, and we will all, by the way, we are we're free to take questions from the audience at any time if anyone has a question. Shall we ask her to go first? Yeah, and maybe after that if there are any questions.
I thought maybe to change the question, is it not true? Yeah, and I enjoy fiction, and fiction, we all understand it helps us to gain awareness and understand more of ourselves, and in that sense make us more grounded, more true to ourselves, right? So I chose a passage that resonated with me. My portion here, not so much on a narrative about what happened to a person, but I like the description. And I was thinking as I read it, if I do it effectively, perhaps you could imagine it. Every evening around 4 p.m., All it would take was for one child to walk along the path, looking up expectantly for another child from the blocks around to saunter in with a stick, a bat, a ball, a skateboard, rollerblades, or a bicycle. A group would grow organically, and like a flock of birds, they would race all over the estate. The sounds of their voices swelling and fading, swinging and circling around the blocks. Fortunately, there was enough space between the residential buildings and the playground some distance away, so they did not often wander too far from the car park on the outer edges of the blocks. It was a good thing they lived on the ground floor. When they first saw the old flat in the aging estate, Mrs. Joseph and her husband had immediately agreed it was suitable for them. It was not slick or posh, like so many of the fancy new condominiums coming up, not covered with steel and glass and hard reflective surfaces like the towering structures downtown. The grass was overgrown in some areas, and the trees old and oddly shaped. Potted plants of all sizes, fruit trees and herbs, unauthorized barbecue sets, discarded bicycles, flapping laundry on assorted stands, garden furniture, tools, and other decorative garden ornaments, and crouched into the common areas and settled in comfortably. And this portion, I liked it because having lived, in HDB flats and also in a private landed house, when I read this, I'm reminded the privilege of living in a HDB flat in closed space. But then, I realized, all these potted plants, all these discarded items which you see, they can be unsightly, but it reminded me of how tolerant we are of one another in a HDB flat. And I find in the private area, private housing, that's where my parents live, people are not so tolerant when something is discarded. and it's true, people running, and I remember growing up, we were in a HDB flat and we would run a lot, along the corridor. We made a lot of noise, but people accepted it. It's just children, But I think as we move on and modernize, a little bit of that is lost. So I like this part. And I like another part. It's over here. By 7 p.m., the boys were supposed to be back. Shower at 7, dinner at 7:30. Check your timetable and homework, and pack your school bags before you get to bed. Their mother would remind them day after day. Despite that and all her remonstrations, she knew she could expect the same scramble every morning. An assignment undone, a parent consent form unsigned, money for a class trip uncollected, the usual challenges of a lost dog, wet sports shoes with a disappointed outcry. But I have a match today, and other unpredictable schoolboy routines. I have 4 boys in my family. And this happens very often. But when it's written down here, I can laugh about it. But when it's happening, it's not a joke. So this is how this portion resonates with me.
Maybe we didn't mention the title for those of you, some of you I think are trying to refer to the pages. The book, the title of the story that you read.
It's Monitoring the Situation.
Monitoring the Situation. That was from that. Do we have, if anyone has any questions or so far, please let us know.
I have a comment, actually. I'm amazed and it must be the text of the book, and it must be the interpretation. This baby does not stay still. And yes, I have a cake, but the cake doesn't do much in other situations. And the fact that she has been quiet, and she looked at you when you spoke, and she's still there and in the same place is actually really, really amazing. And thank you very much for having me that and giving me this experience. And actually, it also makes me feel that what kind of calming effect the reading and words and maybe also the belief in what we really has and can have in children. Thank you. I'm really honored to participate, to be able to participate.
We're all teachers and who recommend reading aloud and storytelling very strongly, so you're already on our side. Okay, so who's going next, Jess?
Perhaps I'll just read it first before I
Just mention the title so that people can find.
The Orange.
The Orange. Karen, page what?
I'm starting from page 60. When she entered her class, Chantal was holding court at her desk while her admirers grouped around her. Her long limbs swayed languidly in the air as she described the joys of a weekend. Flirty whisper, she confided intimate details of her shopping for delicate lingerie and the newest fragrances, the expensive beauty treatment her mother had treated her to at an international spa, the new clothes and shoes she had bought, top rental cost, and the wonderful meal they had enjoyed before they headed home. The girls hung on her every word. Chantal was that kind of girl, the girl who had everything.
She responded. I mean, she responded to the stories herself. I mean, it was her. She just felt comfortable putting it this way. The only difference, perhaps, is that her initial sketch. I mean, as an artistic sketches, it was like, okay, is the layout okay, and give me some input about the particular characters. And then I think we decided that it's at some level. I was going to ask because it's quite simply written. Right? The language is actually very simple. It's not very literary language in that sense. So it's probably accessible to a fluent reader of about 8 to 10, could possibly read it as well. But we didn't want the picture to be too primary school. We wanted to make sure that, so that there's, that all children below that would read. But we are very, very happy that actually it has serious crossover appeal in the sense that many adults are reading it as well, I'm hoping. Yeah, so do we have any comments or questions?
I showed this to my husband, and the first thing he said was, "Why did Rosemarie write a book about Angmo girls?"
Okay.
And I said, "No, can't you see the uniform? It's obviously either from a convent school or from RGS." And he says, "No, look at the hair." And I'm like,
and what was your reaction to that?
I said, "Don't look at the hair, look at the uniform."
So it's very funny because it's the same thing here. You see, when I knew I was writing about the local situation, and the illustrator chose to represent it like this, and when she, presented it, we already had a background of the story, and then for her it was not photographic realism so much. It was sort of a sketch. I mean, there was a certain particular style she was using. And she had different colors in it. It was not a completely finished. If you notice, it still has that sketch effect. It's not a completely finished painted thing. So she chose different backgrounds. I think she did a blue, a purplish shade, a bluish shade, and then we just sort of chose because the skin. We didn't want it to look too drab, We did want people to actually pick it up. So, and of course, the pictures are beautiful, but it had to also appeal to the young, and we didn't want it to look very dire. So we chose this, but for some reason, it had not ever occurred to me. It had never, ever occurred to me. I don't know about why that the hair could be construed as blonde. I mean, but and having said that, when people said, "Well, why is it?" Because I went to an event, CDAC event, where I was telling a story, and I happened to show them the flyer, and then they said, "Oh my God, Angmo." And why don't you write about local people? And I said, but it is about local people. And then she said, if you examine the faces, there are a couple of Chinese faces in there. But for some reason, because the Chinese face is not center stage, they seem to think it's not about them. Right? So, which I thought, okay, then get used to it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, because really, there have to be different perspectives as well. And to be honest, I can actually show you people who look like that. And in fact, the trigger for this, my first story is...
It's okay because it reminds us of our granddaughters who are
Fantastic!
Blonde hair.
Yeah, good. Exactly, because people have very narrow definitions, and we are so often just looking at the externals and defining everyone by everything that they look at. And so, I mean, I was happy that the illustrator went with that, and thank you so much. So that we were one more reason. But you see, my point is anyway. As a storyteller, as I said, I'm not one of those who has a very strong opinion about I am right and you better listen. I really offer the story, and then it's up to the person to interpret it in any which way they want, and they may not like it at all. And it's a perfectly legitimate excuse. So I mean, a response. So to me, that's fine, because I'm just telling one story, and thank you so much. So you can say.
I think maybe a comment on the cover. I think every story must have different layers. Right? And so in the same way, a cover should also have certain layers, different layers. And this particular cover, of course, I mean, first thing is that, okay, the hair is blonde, My daughter used to have blonde hair, so okay, I say, sorry, she had black hair, which turned blonde. Then she said, what do you think, Dad? I said, I think you should put it green, I said. She should have made it green, I said. But anyway, so there's a different layer, because what attracted me to it was the fact that the uniform gave it a very local setting, but the hair is blonde, and then I could see the Chineseness of the girl on the extreme left, is a Chinese girl. So there were different layers, and I think it is a reflection of our society, cosmopolitan society, where there is this intermixture of Chinese, Indian, Malay, yeah, and so to me it was a cover that had all those layers, and it worked for me actually. Yeah.
Thank you. How are we doing for time?
Yeah. Next reader.
Next reader?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm going to be reading The Raid.
Page.
Don't look at the book.
Listen.
Just listen. You can close your eyes, I won't be offended. Anna was late again. So was Liz. The mother sighed. Where were her daughters? What on earth was going on? Why was there so little time to relax, to chat, to play? Why was life such an unending cycle of rushing around trying to cope with school and work? Or was something other than school the distraction? What did teenagers get up to nowadays? Mrs. Joseph frowned as she pottered around in the kitchen, getting the dinner ready. Her sons charged in and out of the house again. There seemed to be at least 5 boys playing today, including her twins, Sam and Zach. But at least these boys appeared to have a childhood of sorts, for now, at least. Goodness knows how long it will last, she thought. Ma, how come these seem to be the only boys who ever play outside? Anna had once asked, looking out of her window. Perhaps the others are frightened off by the noise these rascals make, Liz had responded, as one of them raced through the kitchen, droplets of sweat flying off him as he passed. Most of the other children, boys and girls alike, would pass by quietly in their school uniforms, carrying their school bags, on their way to tuition class in maths, Chinese, English, or other enrichment classes. They did not make much noise, and they did not look left or right as they walked. Sometimes they could be heard practicing hard on their pianos. The music floating out of 1 or 2 homes sounded quite good, really, but Mrs. Joseph was not sure of the others. However, with insufficient musical training, she did not consider herself competent to make any judgment in these matters. But where were the girls today? Why were they so late again? It was beginning to get dark and the street lights had come on. Then Anna and Liz came in together. They looked anxious and tense. Mrs. Joseph wiped her hands and turned to look at them. What's up? What's the matter? Why are you both looking so worried? Anna sat down and began to cry. Liz raised a tentative hand to her sister's shoulder and she said, Ma, the cops came to school today. The cops? The police? Why? Mrs. Joseph's heart was pumping up. What happened? This began. I saw some police cars come into school. Then there was an announcement that all the students were to leave their bags in class and report immediately to the hall. All the students from all the classes, no exceptions. Why? What happened? The principal explained that someone had reported that drugs were being passed around the school. She said the school had no say in the matter for such a serious problem. Since this is Singapore, she had no choice but to call in the police. And then, while most of the students stayed in the hall with some of the policemen, the teachers and the prefects had to go into the classrooms and search for all the bags. What? The prefects too? Yes. Anna, you had to search the bags. Anna, tell me, did you find anything? Anna, are you all right? Anna, look at me, tell me what you found. There it ends for me. We need to buy the book to find out more. Well, I chose the story because it gives you a lot of the reflections about what you see in your everyday life. Kids running around. The piano struck a chord with me because I always hear some kid playing piano, you know, the opposite block going dang, 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 dang. I'm like, good grief, you know. So it's the reflections of life and also the fear as well as the anxiety of the mother, thinking a connection with the child. And some of these things come back to me when I was a young girl because I remember my mother was always afraid. We didn't have handphones at the time, so you know how old I am. But, you know, that time we didn't have handphones, it was not so easy, so you had to call. If you forget, the mother gets really anxious. So it kind of struck a chord because my mother was always very anxious where I was, and if I came late, that was it. I would get hell. So yeah, that's why I chose the story. Thank you.
That's a true story, that a prefect is made to search a bag of their peers, you know, in school for drugs.
You know, there, one of the girls in that generation did not know about my book. She met with the old classmates later, and suddenly, apparently, the conversation turned to it. Yes, it's true that the prefects were made to check the bags on that occasion.
For drugs.
Yeah. And I thought that was an extremely heavy burden.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that was really inappropriate. And it was interesting because that, as I said, that the person discussing it had no idea about that it was in the book. But it did happen. It did happen. And then, interestingly enough, after the book came out, or around the time of the launch, there was also some discussion in the papers that actually there's a resurgence of you know, drug activities in schools again. So, yeah.
But the question about a heavy burden being on a girl.
Yeah, you see, that I think is really quite complicated to make the prefects go and search, because it is, I mean, I'm hoping that people will learn to address these issues as well, because, you know, I don't think, you know, I mean, I'm sure, I mean, I didn't finish that story because actually, you know, some girls were expelled, and it was quite complicated. I know that it, but you know, we didn't get the final picture because they had to deal with it privately. So it's just some of these issues, again, it becomes quite complicated for young children when they're caught in the net with these kind of issues, and we don't know where it will lead. And because I think children nowadays come from all kinds of places and spaces, and they are interacting with very unusual, you know, certainly the world is exploded.
But it's something very, something that must be reflected upon, that you are asked to report on your own, on your friend. This could be your best friend, you know. And then you find, and then what do you do when you find, let's say you do find a drug. It's a very, very heavy burden, you know.
And it's not only for drugs, but I think this, I mean, that's an aspect that bothers me a little bit when one is required to betray your friends, you know. It goes deeper than that. I mean, I'm sure, yeah. So some of these issues are the issues that they only seemingly seem to, I mean, are about children, but actually they're deeper. They reflect other things. Because for me, yeah. Anyways, education is not limited to school anyway. I mean, and I don't even mean when I say education is for life, I don't mean that you are being prepared for life. Actually, the whole of life is an education, really speaking. So I think these issues are things that I think about. You know, in the old days, for me it's interesting because in the old days when I came to Singapore 30 years ago, so when I came in, I would not even have dared to speak about some of these things because every time I opened my mouth, I was treated like some kind of weirdo. I mean, I was so, really speaking, there wasn't anyone that I could even articulate these thoughts to. So, and I think maybe some of it was, again, this whole, the whole weight of, you know, science, math, and English. Just very functional. I wouldn't call that an education, but I mean, you know, skills training. And I can quite understand the reasons why, and I mean, I'm very well aware of the reasons why these things happen. But we have certainly come to a point in our society where we need to be thinking about these things more deeply. Yeah. I mean, that's my own.
I have to admit that when Nancy and I read it separately, she told you and I told you that the first thing that came to my mind was this would make a very good literature book for secondary school. Sec 1.
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, I'm glad. And so, I mean, is it a true story? Yeah, there are so many aspects of it that are true because I'm not. No, there are some people, as I said, who are really brilliantly creative, and as a storyteller, of course, working with very young children, we do, I mean, sometimes absolutely ridiculous and absurd stuff for entertainment. But in the core of it all, there is always something special. That there has to be something of value, and however ridiculous or entertaining or silly or the outward, you know, the packaging might seem, there is a core in every little story that is really valuable, and that thing has to slip in, you know, meaningfully, and so that's how we try to work.
My husband and I have been talking about his book, other than our kids, for quite some time.
That's nice.
He asked a question. He asked, "What is Rosemarie's ethnicity?" Which I told you. And I said, "Oh, she's Indian." And he said, "What? Alien?" I think he misheard me, but we laughed about it. Then we looked at each other and we thought, there is some truth in that. In it, not that you're from another planet, but the thing is, you offer a perspective that, being a Singaporean, we may not see it. When you're in the system since you're born, and you grow up in it, you just go, you lose the ability to stand outside and to look at it. But because you came from another country and you see things from a different perspective, from a different frame.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I mean, I know you sent me an SMS saying that my husband, Indian is an alien. Yeah. And then you said hey or something. So I thought it was a joke, but I'm grateful that you had this other perspective. That maybe in a sense that it is a different perspective. And I think being an outsider in many ways is actually a great freedom. All right. I mean, it gives you that. And that's another aspect that I want to bring out. In all these years, I mean, from the year I came to now, I've always been involved with community work of some kind or the other, trying to serve in whichever way I could, to the best of my ability. But for a long time, I did get the sense that I was often defending Singapore to Singaporeans. In the sense that when, I'm talking about intimate conversations where people are relaxed enough, they know you well enough, and then they're sharing something, and then there's a kind of, it used to seem to me that some people felt very trapped by the system, And I never had the sense of feeling trapped because to me, as I said, maybe as you said, coming from a completely different perspective, you do have a choice. You do have a choice. You can accept it or not accept it. But then having said that, maybe I had that freedom to not accept it because I was an outsider anyway. I wasn't allowed, in so many different ways. But 5 years ago, I became a citizen. And then after having become a citizen, I found that this is my country, and if I don't speak up, who is going to speak up, right? So I really felt that it's imperative that we have to be as honest as we can about whatever our perspectives. As I said, by no means am I saying that it's the only perspective or it's the only right, but what I mean is that we all need to respectfully willingly contribute and stand up for our beliefs, because if we don't, then really, if you don't shape your country, who's going to do it for you? So, I mean, thanks for sharing that. So, yeah, so the outliers are always very useful. I think actually, I mean, you know, really speaking, it is extremely dangerous. I really think it's extremely dangerous if you're too obedient. I mean, in any society, in any kind of, because there have to be the ones who will take the risks of standing out a little bit. It can be quite scary, but then, you know, you've got to make a choice in some way. Yeah.
Yes.
One more reading maybe, and then we spend time in reading.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
The first time I read this at the book launch, I did not explain why I chose this story, but I'm going to this time because of the topic that Karen has brought up. I grew up in Singapore, but I'm not Chinese, I'm not Indian, I'm not Malay, and I've always had to take others because they don't have a category for me. And when I became a teacher, I taught primary ones, and children are always curious about their teachers, so they say, "Are you Chinese?" No. "Are you Malay?" No. "Are you Indian?" No. And one very clever boy said, "I know! You're Indian!" So I had been called that. So when I read this, it reminded me of something that happened to me. I am one of the characters in here, but I won't tell you which one yet. So it's the first story, the Nevermind Girl. Anna was fastidious. She made sure that the pleats on her uniform, her pinafore, sat just so and tucked her belt in just the right place. She parted her hair carefully and combed it just the way she wanted it to be. She checked that her laces were exactly right, the right length on both sides. Then she set off for school. It was the beginning of the school year and she was both eager and anxious. Would any of her previous classmates be with her again? Would she be able to find new friends? Would she like her new teacher? Would her teacher like her? When she entered the classroom, she noticed a group of girls sitting on one side. They looked at her and smiled. She smiled too, quickly, and found a seat near them. She did not say anything. During the lesson, as the teacher handed out notes, one of the girls passed them to her. When the bell rang for recess, the girl looked at her and said, "Hi, I'm Josephine. You can call me Jo. Come sit with us." Anna was delighted. She had found new friends. That evening, she went home happily, a smile on her face and a song in her heart. She looked forward to the next day. At school the next morning, she made her way to Jo and her new friends. On the way, another girl looked at her and smiled at Anna. Anna smiled back too and said, "Hello," and she moved on. When she reached her place, Jo asked, "Who was that girl you smiled at just now?" "I don't know her name," said Anna. "She smiled, so I smiled back." "Don't," said Jo. "She is not one of us." Anna said nothing. During the day, she tried not to look at the other girl, the one she had been told was not one of them. She concentrated on her new friends. The following day, as Anna lined up to get her food at recess, she chatted with the girl in front of her. When she carried her food to her table, Jo asked, "Who was that girl? Why did you talk to her? Can't you see she's not like us?" Anna said nothing. She tried not to look at the other girl again. She concentrated on her new friends. She tried to be loyal to them.